Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. I still have that nasty cough, which anybody who's been listening to me for years now knows that every time I get something like this, it stays with me for 2 or 3 months, which I don't know why. I'm not a doctor, but just wanted to give you all fair warning that there's probably going to be a whole lot of turn my head and cough away from the mic in this one, but I'm going to try my best. So let's jump in and see what we got this week. First up, some people who have purchased the GamesCare SCART or component video switches were getting what sounded like audio clipping, where there's kind of scratchiness or distortion or popping. And first and foremost, this is not a safety issue. There is no risk to your console, to the switches, to your stereo, to the TV. This is a quality issue, a sound quality issue, not a safety issue. So right off the bat, you don't have to worry. And also, for whatever reason, some people just weren't getting the issue. I'm not sure if it was a combination of consoles or whatever else, but the issue was actually some of the components on the board. And the problems don't come up over every single console in every single scenario, which is why I didn't catch them, because I just did my basic, SNES audio tests for the white screen and the Konami logo, and I did all of the video quality tests to make sure that there wasn't any interference being added, and it passed all of those, but I didn't try every single console, which maybe I should have, but then I would never get to do any other videos. So my apologies if I messed up in any way for that one. But the fix is a bit complicated in that it's one of those things that it's not hard, but it's not for beginners. You have to lift some legs. You have to do a few things. There's a full guide on how to do that, including all of the parts that you need. So this is really one of those things that, if you bought one of these switches, are you having the problem? If the answer is no, or you're having it so little it doesn't actually bother you, then just probably leave well enough alone. If you are having the issue and you purchased it from Video Game Perfection, you could send it back and have them do the fix for free. If they do the fix, they're also going to add the new firmware update, and that has some other fixes to it. It's user selectable pin 16 voltage. That's for PAL CRTs. Faster startup time, automatic over-the-air updates for future firmware, which is actually a pretty big feature, and the LCD menu allowing configuration of advanced features without the need for a Wi-Fi connection. So it's a pretty cool firmware update and something that you should do, but it does require, this firmware update will require some hardware. Now, I think it's like including shipping less than $10 worth of hardware, but it is still something that you'd have to plug into the port and connect to your machine, and then from then on, you should be able to get the updates over Wi-Fi. So if you love these switches, which a lot of people do, by the way. A lot of people who bought these really thought they were the perfect switch for their setup. So if that's the case, take the time to do the fixes and update the firmware, and then you just have yourself a solid switch for a long time. And if not, leave well enough alone if it's just working the way you have it. But the full guides and links for absolutely everything are right here in the post. Links to purchase, links for both the firmware explaining the firmware and the audio fix. I also hosted a copy of the firmware. Fabio from GamesCare asked if I wouldn't mind doing that. So I just have another location for people who want to download the firmware zip file. So everything is right here in the post. But, it's just one of those things where if you bought it and you're having the issue, it sucks, and I'm sorry. But at least GamesCare and Video Game Perfection are really bending over backwards trying to get the fix out to everybody. And once again, there are also a ton of people who are using these with no problems whatsoever. So check out the post for all the info you need. Next up, Retro Gaming Cables just announced a new batch of SCART 621 switches, which are currently my favorite entry-level switches for anybody looking to connect multiple consoles to one device. It's 6 in, 1 out only. If you need to split it to multiple sources, you need to find something else to do that. However, I tested the version that was for the RetroTink 5X, which is identical except for the output port, and everything was perfect. The video and audio quality stayed exactly the same. And since it's a manual push button switch, whatever goes in comes out. So you don't have to worry about the use case of you're running one component video console over SCART and mixing the signals, or do you want your composite video to pass through also? None of that's an issue, because with these manual push button switches, all signals are just sent through. The other side of that is there's no automatic switching, there's no sync stripping if you needed that for Extron devices or something. But I mean, if you want an entry-level switch, this is what you get, and I really, really liked this one. So if you want to check out the review of the Tink 5X version, it's the exact same thing. The only difference is instead of plugging directly into the Tink 5X, this has a SCART port on the output side, and it also breaks audio out to a 3.5 millimeter jack, so you could use either or both if that's something that you would want to do. And remember, with audio Y splitting like this, it's electrically safe to do, but you might get some interference if you're plugging both audio in at the same time. So like SCART to your TV and audio to your stereo. Just try it and see. There's no safety issues whatsoever for that. But yeah, the price is $75 at the current exchange rate, and they're due to ship in April. So while it's technically a pre-order and things could always get delayed, you could expect to get it in just over a month. So I think this is definitely something that you should pay attention to if you're looking for a lower cost but high quality SCART switch. Retro Gaming Cables is on a roll because they also just opened another batch of pre-orders for their RAD2x cables. These will also be due to ship sometime in April, so a short pre-order batch. And these are still the only plug-and-play HDMI cables I would ever suggest for older consoles that don't natively do 480p, because there's zero latency and it processes the image correctly. So they only go to 480p. They're not some magic device. It's not a Tink 4K in a cable, but they work totally fine and they don't take away from the experience. So if you only have one or two consoles that you want to plug into a flat panel or any kind of digital device, or if you just want to have some backups or some spares or some extras, these are perfect solutions for that. However, if you have a whole bunch of consoles and you want to connect them to your flat panel, getting a scaler might be more cost effective overall. If you want to get the best out of it, you'd also have to get RGB SCART or HD Retrovision cables and the scaler. So at the end of the day, it's really up to you to decide what you want to do. The only thing I wouldn't do, unless you already own a bunch of RAD2Xs, I wouldn't get like a Tink 4K and run the RAD2Xs through an HDMI switch into it, because the Tink 4K and even the 5X's analog to digital conversion circuits are much more advanced, because of course they are. They're much more expensive, they're bigger, they have room for all that stuff. The RAD2X does exactly what it's supposed to do. I'm not taking away from that, but if you are thinking of planning on redoing your setup, I wouldn't go these into a scaler. One or two or something, if you already own it, fine, but I wouldn't plan on buying these for that use. But direct into an HDMI switch into your TV or something like that would work fine. So just take a look at your your total setup and see what's going to work best for you. I also did the intro video to the RAD2X, as well as videos on all of the individual versions. So definitely check those out if you're interested. And of course, you could always look at the Get a Scaler video or the Tink 2X Pro video I did that kind of puts all this stuff into perspective. So I think most people listening probably knew all of that. But if you have friends that are looking to get into this, just send them a timestamp to this section of the podcast and tell them to watch those videos in the post. Limited Run Games has just sent an email out to people telling them not to use the NES cartridges Rugrats, Adventures in Gameland, and Pio Pow, saying that they're running at an improper voltage and could potentially damage your console. They said that they're working on making a new batch as soon as possible and will be sending replacements to whoever bought it. And also, people who ordered the collector's edition of Rugrats will have a choice of either waiting to get everything with the correct cartridge or getting the box and extras first and then the cartridge later on. This is one of those scenarios in which it's probably fine if you were already using it. I personally would not use it in my old and fragile console, but this is not a scenario in which you're going to plug the game in, press power, and your console will explode. The thumbnail of the post here is actually a throwback to the first time we had this conversation, and while it is kind of a fun, silly clickbait that's just supposed to make you giggle, you are supposed to be knowing about this stuff. So sometimes clickbait has a true purpose to it. You should really know that if you own these carts, replacements are coming, and probably best to not use them until they show up. So there's a lot to unpack about this, though. So if you don't care, please move to the next section. It's probably going to be long and wordy, and I hate wasting your time. But this is one of those scenarios where I think more information is better than less. So expect a kind of a wordy rant here, but I hope some people at least stay with it, because that way you could understand where the concern really lies. So first of all, if you want to know a great explanation of what this whole 3.3 volt flash thing is, we talked about this a long time ago on the Retro Roundtable. And it turned into a big deal, not because the problem was a big deal, but because so many morons just tried to attack us for the craziest reasons. My favorite was they're just making a panic over this to sell cartridges. None of us sell cartridges. I don't sell anything. So it turned into a big deal, especially for how small of a following we had back then because of the misinformation. So if there's any hostility in that Retro Roundtable, know that that's kind of our thing. We were just joking on each other the entire time we did those. But that's kind of why we were a little harsh on this. We were harder on the people who were arguing than we were on the problem itself. And a good way to look at the problem itself is if this were a cartridge that offered you a lot, like those original ROM carts that ran at improper voltage, it might actually be worth the trade-off here. You might say, all right, well, I get so much benefit from using this that lowering the life of my console faster than just normal wear and tear might actually be worth it. It's my strong opinion that just 2 games are not at all worth that risk, even if it lowers your console. Not, even if you had 10 years left on it, now you only have 9.5. That's not worth it for just a couple of games that should have been built right in the first place, because there's so much information about this out there. We've talked about it. It's at the point where if you manufacture cartridges for retro consoles, you should definitely know about this. Consumers shouldn't, because why should you have to? But people who make these things should. And it's a very, very simple problem to avoid. You have an electrical engineer check the design before it's made. There are many people in the retro scene who make quality cartridges that could help at very fair prices. And then after they're manufactured, you do the same thing. I learned this 20 years ago working at that company where we made medical grade computers. And I learned this because of the mistakes that I made to get there. And that as soon as you have something manufactured, you have one of the first batch right off the manufacturing line air shipped to you, and you do a full quality check on it. Now, in the case of games, the ROM itself, you would plug it in and just kind of play around in the game. I think testing the ROM should be thoroughly done before you even make the cartridges, not after. But you do a ROM check, maybe one playthrough of the game, and then you take it apart, you make sure the cartridge edge is beveled, and then you make sure that you have an electrical engineer also take a look at the circuit and make sure all the right parts were used. That will cost next to nothing, comparatively speaking, for a manufacturing run like this. There is no excuse not to do this. Using the proper parts, running at the proper voltage, doesn't cost an arm and a leg more. It's just basic quality control. There should never, ever have been an issue with this. So why, I guess a couple more things. It's this problem, running these carts at the wrong voltage, will, without a doubt, lower the lifespan of your console more than if you were just using original carts that are in good condition. However, it is my opinion, and the people in the Retro Roundtable are all smarter than me. Some are smaller though, but they might have a different opinion. But it is my opinion, based on what I've learned and what I know about this stuff, that there are far worse things to worry about. For me personally, number one would be using a crappy power supply, like those made for NES power supplies you find for $1 on AliExpress or eBay. Those will absolutely kill your console faster. I haven't done a full analysis. They will allegedly kill your consoles faster, but seriously, they will. Don't use those. They're garbage. That's way more of an issue. Another problem would be, let's say you take it apart, not even to mod it, just to clean it, and you don't ground yourself, and you touch one of the chips and static electricity zaps it. That's going to be far more damaging than just using this cartridge a couple of times. So why do people make such a big deal about this? Well, it's because when you're spending money on something, you should buy exactly what you expect. You shouldn't go through a company like Limited Run Games and get treated like an AliExpress fly-by-night seller. And there are absolutely enough concerns to worry about that. But I think the bigger issue, which I kind of went into a little bit in the post, is that whether you like or hate limited run games, you have to understand they're a pretty big target. So people love crapping on them. And anybody who's been listening to me knows that I try to always approach them fairly. I've defended them thoroughly in the past for things that I didn't think were totally their fault. And times like this that I think it's all their fault, I tell the truth. So I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm just trying to be neutral and explain what this drama is all about. But the issue is that limited run games is now a pretty big target. So you had that one notorious company a couple of years ago just come right out and say, Voltage is crap. People are just making stuff up. I'm still going to make them exactly as they are and, whatever, and it doesn't matter. They probably should have gotten sued for that, but who's going to do it? The 100 people that bought the cartridges? Do all 100 people even know or care? Who's going to pay for that lawyer? And how are you going to get your money back? They're probably going to have to file bankruptcy immediately if you do that. So nobody did it, and I don't blame them. And you certainly aren't going to go against AliExpress sellers because they'll just disappear and pop up the next day under a different name with the exact same everything else. So there was no point. But now, with limited run games, this is what they do. This is their business model, and they sell a lot more than those other companies. And I hate to be negative, but there's gonna be some bottom feeding lawyer out there that wants to make a big deal about this just to get their name out there. And now the burden of proof is on limited run games to show why they sold things that run at the wrong voltage and how they may or may not be killing people's consoles. Now, as a nerd, I could say that if you plugged this console into your NES, turned the power on, and it died, it was probably going to die no matter what cartridge you put in it next time. But I can't prove that. And I don't think limited run games could prove that either, but everybody can prove that they're running at the wrong voltage. So that's why this is such a big deal, is this is the first time that there might be some serious repercussions for this, because once again, it should never have happened in the first place. There's no excuse for this. Doesn't matter who made them, doesn't matter who designed them. You pay an EE 2 hours, minimum 2 hours labor to just check out the final product to double check, and that's it. Should have never, ever, ever happened. Now, that's it for the main issues. I hope this all works out, but I do have a couple of other nitpicks that I would have never discussed if I wasn't already talking about this. First, I had seen posts, Ray Command shared a few posts about Rugrats. If you're in 2-player co-op mode, you could potentially get stuck towards the end, and while you could sort of get out if you didn't know about it, it could be called a game-breaking glitch. So I don't know if that's something that was caught at all before, but since they're already remanufacturing the carts, maybe have a patched ROM out there to fix that issue so the issue doesn't exist. I did try to look into it, but the original person who posted on social media deleted the posts or something, so I'm not sure how deep that goes, but it was worth mentioning just because I hope Limited Run Games thinks about that. Some other nitpicks, though. What does LRG think is going to happen to these carts that are already out there that they told people to discard? Do they think they're actually going to throw them out, or do they think they're going to put them on eBay 6 months from now and hope they blend in with the rest and now they have a bunch of crappy carts floating around? Is there at least going to be some clear differentiators on the newer ones, even just using a different color PCB? So all you have to do is look at the bottom. Even if the labels peel off, you still know what's what. So I hope they do that. Also, and this is definitely just a nitpick, but I don't really buy a lot from LRG, but every time I've bought a collector's edition, it shipped long after the regular edition. And obviously that's what's happening here too. So I just don't understand. Customers that pay more money are punished and have to wait longer. I still haven't played RZ because it was supposed to be released, I think, February of last year. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get some time together so I could play this game, because that's unfortunately what life's like now. I have to plan out when I want to play a game. And I didn't get the game for over 6 months later because people who bought the collector's edition had to wait longer. That's insane to me. Now, I will wholeheartedly say I don't buy a lot from them, so maybe every other case it's different, but the stuff I have bought from them is like this. You have to wait longer? How does that even make sense? So, yeah, I don't know. Other nitpicks, feel free to discuss, but as far as the voltage goes, hopefully I was able to sum this up and not ramble too long and give you the info that you need, and I'm sorry I talked too much. And speaking of the NES, the RetroTime NES Hub Bluetooth adapter is now in stock and ready to ship. And I've talked about this a bunch of times, but I do know there's a lot of people listening that just refuse to do pre-orders now, which, look, 8-Bit Mods, Stone Age Gamer, they're solid stores that almost always meet or exceed your expectations for shipping, but I still understand. I want to wait till it's in stock. I want to press a button and have it show up in a couple of days. So that's why I wanted to repost and talk about this again. It's in stock. It's ready to go. It's a plug and play adapter that allows you to do things like connect expansion audio without modding your console, connect wireless controllers, use controller adapters. Tito from Macho Nacho Productions did an awesome video on it a while back, which I linked in the bottom of this post. So check that out for all the details. Links to everything you need are right here. And this is just a quick heads up that they're in stock and ready to go. The Sega Saturn game Mobile Suit Gundam now has a full English translation thanks to Shadow Mask and his team, and this is more than a translation. This also has some quality of life upgrades, but also the FMV cutscenes were all upgraded by using the PlayStation 2 versions, which Shadow Mask was able to extract and then insert into the Saturn version, but you had to do it in a way where you had to edit frame by frame to match the Saturn version as well. So this is just one of those labor of love translations that is so cool. You get a bunch of upgrades, you get better quality FMVs, and of course you get the English translation, so you're able to play it and understand. But this is just super impressive, and Dan's post has all of the details in there, and there's even a launch trailer for it. So if you have the ability to play Saturn homebrew or Saturn backups, whatever you want to call them, definitely try this out if you wanted to play the Mobile Suit Gundam games, because this is a pretty cool upgrade. And now, like I always say, I love translations because they allow other people to play games for the first time that they would never have been able to before if they didn't speak Japanese, speak or read. So thanks very much to the team, as always, for working on awesome stuff like this. And if you're interested in the game, please check out Dan's post with a ton of details and links and even comparisons, the cutscenes and stuff like that. It really gives you all the info you need on this. So very cool. Tito from Macho Nacho Productions just released a video on how to straighten any cable, which for somebody with OCD like me, that is a big deal. And it's always so annoying when I get a used controller that's crimped or that somebody, wrapped the cable around or tied it. That drives me nuts. And Tito's method of softening the cable and getting it uncrimped seems to be a perfect method. Now, there are a few things that I would like to add, one of which Tito might have actually said, but I just want to repeat it. First, it involves soaking the cable itself in hot water. Tito showed right in the video that waiting till the water gets at a certain temperature range is best. Don't just put it in boiling water, but also make sure that the cable isn't cut or frayed in any way, because then water could get in and that could definitely damage things or cause a voltage issue. You want to make sure that that's not something that you do with a power cable. And in the video itself, Tito went through great caution to not put either end of the cable in. It's quite literally the cable itself, not the end, not the plug side, not the controller, obviously. So it's safe to do. The only other things to add is towards the end of the video, Tito showed how he stretched the cable out in order to have it cool down without any of the crimps. And I've always used a different method. I actually will now be using his hot water method for the cable itself. I usually just, I did the same exact cleaning that he did, but I think that's probably a better way to soften it. However, I would always take the controller and I would have the part that plugs into the console, I would kind of pin that up on a high shelf and let the weight of the console itself stretch the cable. So, and then come back in a couple of days and it would usually be mostly uncrimped. And then after that happened, I would reverse it. I would put the console inside a cardboard box, one of those legal cardboard boxes, so I could cut a hole in the side and drape the cables out the side. I showed a picture of this in the post, and you can see that I didn't use Tito's method on the cables. So while they're definitely not crimped, they're not as straight and nice as the ones that he showed. But this accomplishes a couple of things. First, they don't re-crimp. While yes, the cables themselves do still get dusty, I usually just take like a wet wipe or something and wipe them down if I even notice that they're dusty. And all of the controllers themselves are in the box, so they don't get dusty. The downside of this is you might think it's really ugly to have a mess of wires spilling out the side. I'm a nerd, so I think it's cool, but I totally understand that 99.9% of people would not. And also, you have to be careful with the controllers. I always pick the box up, put it down, open the top, and carefully go through the controllers. It's very easy to throw them in there, and if they get shaken around, they could scratch each other. So that's another concern that you might want to worry about. But in Tito's video, he showed how after they're all dried, he coils them nicely and then puts them in Ziploc bags, and in order to keep them clean and from crimping again, which I know a ton of people that do that as well. So the only question I would have for that is, how do you deal with heat and humidity changes? Do you poke just one tiny little hole in so the bags don't inflate and deflate, or do you just not worry about it? Do you leave the Ziploc just popped over on one end? I don't know. Please let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts on that. But I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do the storage part. I think it's whatever is right for you. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's many wrong ways to do it. Tying your cable in a knot like so many people do is not the right way to do it. Stop it. But I think there's a lot of right ways to do it. So I loved Tito's video. I still am going to keep mine hung like I have been for years now. But are there any other methods that we're missing? Any other thoughts on this? I love weird stuff like this, and I think a lot of other people do too. So chime in the comments if you have any ideas. Pre-orders are now open for a vinyl version of the soundtrack of the NES game Totally Rad. The price is $30 and the release should be summer this year. And the pre-orders are open between now and March 22nd. So you only have that 1 month window in order to get the pre-orders in. And the record itself is 1 LP with 18 tracks and on a neon yellow with magenta, orange, and green splatter vinyl. So one of those colored vinyls, not the black ones themselves. If you want any more info, check out Crystal's post. But basically, if you're a vinyl video game soundtrack collector and you like Totally Rad, jump on this. And if not, wait to the next one. I just posted an interview with somebody who works on professional video preservation and was also a person who helped get the FFV1 codec used in pro archiving scenarios. And Peter was a lot of fun to talk to. We covered so many different topics. If you're a fellow ADHDer, you're probably going to be locked into this conversation because we're all over the place. And to everybody else, I'm sorry. That's what it's like to be friends with people like us. It's awful sometimes, but whatever. It is what it is. But I loved the whole thing. I hope I get to talk to Peter again at some point in the future and follow up on a lot of the things that we discussed. But if you're into video archiving, codecs, Linux, I mean, there are so many different nerdy aspects to this conversation that if you're not into it, you're going to be bored to death. But if you are into it, you're going to love this one. If also, this is kind of some things that it continues the conversation of archiving your own home movies, because while what Peter does is on a completely next level, this is totally something that would apply to anybody who's serious about this stuff. So I would listen to it and kind of think, or listen to his opinion on especially FFV1. I think that from now on, I'm going to at least try to capture directly into FFV1. It's not a big deal if you use Lagarith like I showed in my videos and then copy or retranscode later. You're not going to lose anything from that. But I think I'm going to try my best to embrace it a little bit more, and for all the reasons that we discussed in the video. Also, Peter added a ton of info after the fact. He sent me an email that I basically just cut and pasted and put into this post, and there is so much cool stuff in here, as well as links to things that we already talked about in that. So yeah, I don't know, this was a lot of fun and pretty exciting. And if you're into it, as always, if you're not into this, it's boring, but it was exciting for me. And I think a lot of other people who already kind of gave feedback on this. And I really want to learn a lot more about archiving stuff like this. And I also want to try to put together a video, hopefully by the end of this year, about what method is right for what person, because that is definitely a misconception and something that I'm trying my best to get the right info out. But, like the big one that's been out there recently, no, I do not suggest throwing away a $2,500 time-based corrector and buying a retro tank. I've never said that. I've never even implied that was something you should do. There are absolutely times where pro-level time-based correctors should be used in your pro-level project. But if you're just trying to get some tapes digital, you need any time-based corrector, and the ones built into the Tinks are going to work fine. Stuff like that. I want to try to do it by the end of the year. I also, hopefully soonish, could do some Doomsday live streams to start that testing, because I really, really want to try to nail down when is Doomsday the right option to use for archiving, and when is it not. I have my suspicions, but I don't know for sure, and I want to test myself and present my findings to people so that we could kind of make our decision together on this. But yeah, I'll stop rambling. I'm just really excited about this because now finally we're starting to get to a point where I could paint a clear path for people on what they need to do, because there's so much misinformation out there on archiving analog stuff, and those devices on Amazon are so bad. I haven't tested every single one. Maybe there's one out there that isn't terrible, but probably not. They're probably all made from the same manufacturer anyway. So check out this video and all the rest of them if you're interested. And yeah, this was a lot of fun, and I hope to have Peter back. Bitmap Bureau have just sent out an email to people who purchased the Neo Geo cartridge versions of Final Vendetta, saying that their game will finally ship about summertime this year. Hopefully before, but probably by summertime. They said Q2. And what happened was they tried to make these at the proper quality and were running into a bunch of manufacturing issues. So rather than ship sub-quality stuff out to their customers, they put the whole thing on pause and waited till they got it right. They found a manufacturer that was doing everything the way they needed it to. Everything seems fine now. So now they're ramping up production, and unless something crazy happens, it should all be shipping out to you by summertime this year. So basically, Bitmap Bureau did the opposite of what Limited Run Games just did. They went and did quality control. They found a problem. They halted shipments, and now they're getting the right cartridge out to you. And I really think this was the right move for a couple of reasons. First, it's the right thing to do, but also Neo Geo cartridges are very expensive because they have to be. There's a lot more that goes into making these than any other cartridges like NES cartridges. At the very least, there's 2 much larger PCBs that require a lot more components. So if you spend $80 on an NES cart that doesn't work and you have to wait for, or it works badly and you gotta wait for a replacement, all right, that's annoying. But what if you spent like $400 on a Neo Geo cart that doesn't work right or could potentially damage your console or something like that? So it's good that they really stopped and just kind of made sure that everything was right before shipping it to the customer. I also love that, this is kind of like drawing a line in the sand. Bitmap Bureau stands by their products. They want to make sure that you get the good stuff, and they'll sit there and take whatever crap you give them for being late, which, mistakes happen, that's whatever, but they'd rather do that than ship bad stuff out to you. So I love that. And like I said in the post, we're all human. It's totally fair to be annoyed that you bought something a while back that's missed its ship date and you're still waiting on it. It's fair, but I just hope that you do recognize that it was the right thing to do, both delaying it and just, giving us a status update to let us know what happened. So my personal opinion is thank you to Bitmap Bureau for waiting to get the right thing out to us. A friend of mine asked me to pre-order one, so I actually will be getting one to test when it arrives. I haven't played the game yet. I want the first time I play the game to be on a Neo Geo, so when the cart arrives, I'll do a live stream and just have some fun with this one. But I personally strongly think it was worth the wait to get what you paid for, and I think Bitmap Bureau really did the right thing. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks to everybody who watches and listens and sits through long rants that maybe you didn't care about. I'm sorry for taking so long on the LRG stuff, but I really just wanted to try to clarify things. But, thank you for putting up with all of it. As always, your feedback is always considered. I don't always take it and change what I do, but I always consider your opinions. So, if you would want more info or less info when it comes to stuff like that, or I would love to do no drama at all, but that's not how life works. Sometimes mistakes happen and people just need to be informed about it, whether it's in a positive, negative, or neutral way. So let me know what you think. But as always, thank you, and especially thank you to anybody who supports in absolutely any way, because it is you who's keeping all this stuff going. So thanks again. I'll see you next week. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.